Here's what I found about tech in my nearly 3 decades, that you have to decide if it's a toy or if it's tech. I got in trouble for saying this a few weeks ago. I think we have a lot of adult toys in this industry. That's not what I mean. A lot of adult tech toys.
Now, Keith.
What? I didn't say it. He did.
On this episode of Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered, we talk about the NAR Settlement. We talk about leadership in different companies. We talk about culture, artificial intelligence over the next 36 months, what the future of residential real estate is going to look like. Tune in. You talk about it privately. We talk about it publicly. This is the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. Welcome again to the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. I'm your host, James Dwiggins, along with my co-host, Crazy Uncle Keith.
Yes, sir.
Talk to us about Mr. Nick Bailey, the former CEO of Remax International, as well as the former CEO of Century 21. We had somebody who's been in quite a few positions on the show today.
Nearly 30 years of residential real estate leadership. We covered a broad range of topics. One thing that I loved, he bought his first property at the age of 17. You will dig that story. He's got a lifetime, 30 plus or almost 30 years in residential real estate. What it's like to lead through the various phases, what it's like to lead through the various companies, the importance of vulnerability. Of course, you can't have a podcast without the thoughts on the settlement. And he gives us some good insights, in my opinion, on AI in real estate.
Nick, welcome to the podcast. We finally got you on here. Keith and I were just chatting. We're super excited to talk to you because you, my friend, are someone who's been in this business a super long time. You sat in quite a few chairs, which we want to dive into deeply.
Are you calling me old right out of the gate?
Wow. Yes, I am actually. You're technically you're an elder now. You're an OG.
Whoa.
In the industry.
Oh.
So
hey, I'm not even 5'0" yet, so let's not get too excited.
Yeah.
Someone else is.
And I am, and we're a protected class, so act right, okay?
Soon, Keith will get that special cereal you can order when you're above a certain age.
Like, I just want cheap movie tickets. That's what I'm looking forward to.
That's
like,
good.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'd use it now if I could.
I know you would. That's the best part. Nick, so real quick before we'll dive into our rapid fire, tell the viewers and listeners just a little bit about your background. Just because you've been in this for a while, the different roles that you've sat in. We'll go to our rapid fire and then we'll dive a little deeper on some of that stuff.
Yeah. First off, thanks for having me. This is fun. We've been friends and also competitors. So this is kind of unique. Yes. So no, this is great. But my whole world has been around real estate. And so the quick story of it is, I think it officially started when I was 17. I was a junior in high school and I purchased 2 commercial retail buildings in the community where I lived and leased one. And I had my own business in another. It wasn't real estate. It was something different. And while I was going to college, I bought my first house when I was 18. I decided that spending money on a dorm wasn't that great of an investment, that certainly a 3% down FHA home loan was way better. And so I bought a 4-bedroom house 2 blocks from the college, rented a couple bedrooms. Anyway, when I went to college, I got licensed when I was 21, became an agent, opened an office with a partner within about 3 days of getting licensed, and got married. Been dating my wife since 8th grade, which is pretty cool. And I wanted to
She's lovely, by the way, and I have no idea what she's doing with him. I'm just going to make sure when she hears this, I want to make sure she hears that.
Yeah,
so.
She just walked in, so if I turn up the volume, you can say that again. And so what I didn't realize is at a very young age, real estate was actually starting to become just part of my life. And so it progressed from there. And so I had an office for 5 years, and then I wanted to relocate back to Denver where I had grown up. And I went to work for a small company called Remax. And when I was about 26 years old, I was there 11 and a half years, left for 7, went to Market Leader. Those of you that know that company, a SaaS-based leads CRM company that was shortly thereafter, within about a year, acquired by Trulia, helped lead their industry. And we all know how this story continues. And Zillow acquired Trulia, and I led industry for Zillow Group for 5 years. At the time when it was really contentious and everybody hated the Zestimate, it's calmed down a lot since then. And then ironically, I got recruited to go to Century 21 Worldwide and become their president and CEO. And I said no for 2 or 3 months because I was a Denver guy. I wasn't moving to Jersey, and I have 2 boys, and we just decided this was home. And I finally said yes, and I commuted for a year and a half. It's a long way to the office. And then I came back and I was going to buy a company here in Colorado. And anyway, things turned out. I got a call from the co-founder of Remax, Dave Linegar, and he asked me if I'd consider coming back and leading the Remax brand. And that was about 5 years ago, all of which I concluded. I stepped down from that role just about 2 weeks ago. So I am fresh off the Remax boat, but I served as president and CEO of that company as well. So yes, some interesting, weaves and curves around the industry.
Thanks for putting on a shirt with a collar today, because my guess is you haven't in a couple of weeks. So we appreciate
it. What's ironic? Hey, I got a question. I was voted best dressed in high school, so this is like what I sleep in, Keith.
Yeah. I'm the guy who just wears a black or navy blue T-shirt every single day of my life. That's what I'm striving for. So I have a question based just off of your background that actually has nothing to do with, because we're going to talk a lot about what it was like in those seats and just what you've learned through that process. But 17-year-old you decides to buy 2 commercial buildings?
Yeah, they were right next to each other.
How did that happen?
Yeah, I think it was kind of by accident. A little bit. I'm a bigger kid today than I was when I was a teenager. My parents were self-employed. And so, whether it was dusting shelves or mopping floors or delivering auto parts for my father, and that's why I had a driver's license when I was 14. I bought my first car when I was 13. And so I just had this unique grown-up experience in an entrepreneurial family that kind of gave me a business head start. And so I think that just helped propel it. And these buildings were a bank foreclosure. So they were nothing down. And one of them had a tenant in them. And by the way, if you want to be the dorky ginger that plays the saxophone and is a band geek, you buy the building that has the hottest pizza place in town. This is a true story. Where everybody goes for open campus, but you build into the lease that you get free pizza. So I had tons of friends, ironically, my junior year.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
That's a gangster move.
Savage,
I know. That's hustler from birth. Hustler from birth. All right, we have
let's
rapid
do this.
Fire questions.
Yeah, Keith, kick us off.
Sure. If you were a superhero, you could be any superhero, who would you pick and why?
Superhero. So I'm going to say Superman because, by the way, based on build and just walking around town, you'd never know. But
right, the Clark Kent part.
Yeah, just kind of a cool guy, and then all of a sudden is a superhero and is there to help. Doesn't have as many arch nemesis or enemies as the others.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a good one. I don't think we've actually anybody used Superman yet. Have we?
Yeah, I think we have, but not for the Clark Kent reason as to why. So that's a great
Keith, you've got the glasses for it.
So
I do. That's the only thing I've got.
I mean, at my age, I don't wear glasses, so I don't. Someday, maybe I'll have the Clark Kent look.
And Clark is much better looking.
Age, I caught that. That was a sneak diss. That was very good. That was very solid. Very well done.
Nick, so favorite book or podcast you've read recently or have been watching?
It has to be recent.
No.
Or sure, just whatever. Yeah, just like a favorite podcast or book you've got. Just like people walk away with something.
I get asked all the time, like what my favorite books or what I've recently read. I will admit, I am envious. I am not an avid reader. I think some of the smartest, most intelligent people I know and some of the best leaders are avid readers. I'm not one. I'm very much a current events. I'm very a quick clip. If I read a book, I'll read the first 3 paragraphs. I'll skip to page 9. I'll figure something out there. And I'll read a 100-page book in about 25 minutes and get what I need out of it. And that's just part of my personality. I just constantly move very quick. But, okay, favorite book is the one I read my senior year in high school in French, which was The Little Prince. If you haven't heard about it, it's been translated into 505 languages, the second most translated book, second to the Bible, in history, sold 140 million copies. And it's about a third grade book in France that started out. And here's what I like about it. It's about this kid that goes to different planets and observes human behavior. And I love human behavior. I think it's fascinating. But what he finds is as adults, we sum each other up by asking questions on what we do. So you ever go to a cocktail party or neighborhood party? Oh, hey, Keith, what do you do? Yeah. And then we decide where we're going to put you in a pecking order. Well, what the main character of this book realizes, when you're a kid, if you go to down to the park and there are kids playing soccer and the kids, hey, do you want to play soccer? They don't care what house you live in. They don't care which parents do. No. And you play soccer. And so ever since then, you'll never see me if I go to a cocktail party or any type of social event. I've never asked someone what they do.
You just ask them if they want to play soccer?
I just ask them if they want to play soccer.
That's actually really interesting. That whole commentary was really interesting because you're right. Everybody puts themselves into some sort of box. I'm my first child. She's turning 3, and it's interesting to watch her when you go to a park. She'll just leave me or mom or our nanny and just run straight off and go play with the kids. They don't care about anything. They just want to go have fun, and there's no pecking order. It's a good comment about how we just size everybody up and create all of our own problems.
And by the way, you end up having
all right, can you take us
much more dynamic, interesting conversations with people than what they
for sure.
offers.
Yeah.
Do you have
for sure?
I'll ask a follow-up. Do you have your preferred opener at neighborhood barbecue?
No, I'm not that scripted. I'm not. People ask all the time. Like I did an interview a couple months ago for a magazine and it was like habits of CEOs or something. And I said, well, my habit is I don't have one. I don't wake up at the same time every day. I'm not at the gym at the exact same time every day. I'm not that. I don't follow that script. I decide and I kind of flow. Now that doesn't mean I'm just off wandering, but depending on the person, to me, you can read someone. You meet someone that's kind of quiet, you're going to ask them something different. If they're kind of shy, you're not going to be as loud with them. So I think that's part of the fun of figuring out what are you going to ask them based on the personality.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for just being present, right? Like you just being present and in the moment, and let's just have a real, authentic conversation. It doesn't have to have this sort of trajectory to it. It can just be whatever it is. All right, last question for the rapid fire, then we'll get into real estate shenanigans. If you could have lunch with one person, current or historical, who would it be and why?
This is always such a hard one for me.
I know. There's no wrong answer.
So I could give some. No, I want to have lunch with Faith Hill because I think she's awesome and she could sing to me at lunch.
Boom! Great answer.
Has anyone said that?
Great answer.
No, yes. But like, do you remember the conversation we had in Las Vegas? That's why I'm laughing, because this is a similar. Never mind. I knew you were going to say that. Is my point.
Now I'm
so
petrified.
Yeah,
petrified.
Yeah, that's funny. No, let's keep going with it. So, all right, let's move into main talking points, and I definitely want to get sort of your feedback on stuff because you've had such an interesting perspective on the industry, both working as a broker agent, working for franchises, running two of the biggest in the world, and then also working at, arguably the biggest tech company in residential real estate, Zillow. So you've been in all these different roles. I want to talk about just your approach to leadership, sitting in the highest position of very different companies with very different cultures. I can make that assumption. I think I'm correct.
You are correct.
What did you learn along the way? What was your approach to leadership in these different companies? Did you change it? Is it the same thing that you bring from one to the next? How do you maybe move into a role and lead people in that new role?
That's a good question. I don't think anyone's asked me that before, because you're right. The cultures were vastly different. I think you continue to lead and you continue to evolve as a leader every time you end up leading somewhere. Like, I'm not one that I said, okay, here's the stamp and here's the box and I move here and then here's the stamp we're going to put in place. Mm. And I've met a lot of leaders that are like that. I'm not going to say one of them's right or wrong, but the one thing I will say that I think helped me navigate sitting in those seats in different cultures is I am a big fan of coaching. I've had a personal coach for years. My most recent one over the last year and a half, I meet with every other week and spend an hour with my coach, and it's all under the vein of growth. How is it growth? How do you grow personally and professionally? And I think that's what helped me the most as I continue to evolve throughout this industry. Is I think when leaders get to those seats, they decide that they're only the teacher and they stop being the student. And this probably sounds pretty cliche, but I think what I've picked up most is I looked around and I can put leaders probably in 2 buckets. 50% of them that I highly respect and I think are amazing people. And I've tried to emulate what I think are the best things that I've seen people to respond to from that bucket. And then there's this group of leaders that have gotten in the seats, but their style is not mine. And I've learned just as much what not to do from some of those people as I have from others of what to do. And so I think we sometimes put leaders in these seats on pedestals that they can do no wrong. But I met some pretty crappy ones in those seats that I never wanted to be like. But
like who? No, I'm just kidding. Don't answer that. Don't answer that.
But I think what you find though, number one thing is, are you genuine? Do people, when you meet them, lead, whether it's, casual conversation, whether you're on a stage in front of 15,000 people, do people feel like you're genuine? Right, wrong, or indifferent, they may not agree with everything you have to say or the vision that you have, but do you come across 100% authentic? And that's what I tried to do along the way, and I continue to try to be, is kind of what you see is what you get. Don't always agree, which is okay. But I think the more genuine you come across, the better dialogue you can have and the farther you can advance the ball.
It's valid. It's valid. I think there's a lot of people that aren't themselves. They try to be someone else, and that doesn't work. Like, you got to be your authentic self.
And humor, James. I got to tell you, humor. I mean, I was not a funny guy or a funny kid growing up. I was serious. I told you I was like this adult man when I was a teenager. And I have learned to now take what I do very seriously. Everyone that meets me knows that I take what I do very seriously, but I do not take myself seriously. I laugh, I poke fun, I have a good time. It gets me in trouble once in a while. But I always go back to it's the spirit in which you're intended is how it should be received. But having a little bit of fun in the process, I think, is okay.
Yeah, it's what we do is serious, right? Serious business, but we don't have to take it so seriously. Right, those two things are not the same.
Great way to put it.
Yeah.
I mean, in real estate, you better not take everything seriously because, especially with the world today. I have a question I want to ask around. You went to Century 21, which is one of the oldest brands in residential real estate. I didn't mean that derogatory, by the way. I just meant it's one of the original brands.
Maybe
that been around a very long time.
One of the most established.
Fine,
yeah.
established.
Doesn't have to be old.
Been around a very, very long time. Reputable company. But it got, like this, I will say, it got stale for a while. Like it hadn't changed itself. And you came in and you led one of what I would argue is one of the most difficult things to do. And that is to take Keith's words, to take an established company, tell it that it needs to move in a different direction, and then rebrand them, like complete overhaul of the brand from top to bottom, and then move 10,000, 50,000, however many agents are in the brand to this new world. And like, what was that like? How did you start that? How did you get people on, like, walk us through that?
I mean, like, how do you get the new business cards in every agent's hand? Like, right? Like the logistics involved with that kind of brand transition have to just be insanity.
Yeah, it was fun. It's one of the most fun projects I've done in my career. Certainly not small, but had a partner in crime, the CMO at the time, she was just an excellent leader in the process on the marketing side that helped a lot. So one, you realize that you can't do it alone. It may be your vision, but how did we do it? First off, when they asked me to come to the brand, and keep in mind, when I first got my real estate license when I was 21, that was the first company I worked for. It's kind of a cool story. I got my license August 16th of 96, and I started there August 16th of 2017, which was exactly 21 years later. And I was 21 when I got my license. Like, this story was kind of cool. Anyway, before I even took the role, they took me through an interview process of what would you do with this brand? And I walked them through, here are the things that I think are important, because when you're close to the industry, I know the brands, the leaders, the position with the consumers fairly well. And so I was very forthcoming that I thought that they had skipped a couple of decades in branding. You look at a lot of successful companies that have branded. Coca-Cola, I think, is one that is just a model. If you pull up, and you can Google it if you're interested, all the brands from their very beginning, and you can see how they morphed along the way, but didn't lose their identity. Yeah. And I think that what happened is you have some companies that sit still for 30 or 40 years and don't have those little baby steps of evolution so that when you look back, you stay modern. And so we decided that we had to take a big swing to bring that organization into, the next decade or two. And so we had an agency, and we had a lot of help. We had a lot of consumer testing, and there were a lot of things that went into it. And 80 countries and 128,000 agents. It's a lot to get everybody on board. And is everybody going to like what you do? Because every agent is an expert marketer, and they pick out their own colors and their look. And, they end up destroying, James, you know what I'm talking about, right? They end up taking what is already done for them and mixing it up and making it messy for the consumer. And so it is hard. But I think in order to get something like that done, you have to be steadfast in your decision. There was, without question, I stood on stage in interviews and said, without a doubt, I believe this is the right thing for the company. And if I was flat out wrong, I didn't know it. And when I told people, they didn't think I knew it either. That it was a matter of this is the vision of the organization and who's going to get behind it. And that's how we got it done.
I think to your authenticity point from before, when you can get on a stage or in a conversation and be steadfast in your belief and explain just with real honesty, the way you just did, right? Like reference Coke, talk about how we missed a couple generations of evolution, and you just lay out for people the why, right? Like this didn't happen. I didn't just like roll out of bed and throw a dart and it landed on the, the C with the 2-1 in it, right? Like you did the work, you thought about it, you were purposeful. And usually once you lay that out, you'll go, all right, okay, yeah, that makes sense, right? Did you have that experience, or was there just overall, I imagine most people were pretty happy, but there's always some that aren't. How do you handle that? How do you handle the loud, small segment of the population, but they're usually the loudest with the most complaints?
Two things. One, we obviously assembled a group within the network to provide feedback. And that was all over the place, but still you get the majority. And that's the other piece too, is you have to realize when you're working with a large organization, you have to be okay as a leader with the fact that you're not going to make 100% of people happy. And you're going to have to take some darts. You're going to have to take hate mail on social media. And then there are a lot of compliments that come along with it too, but you've got to be able to handle both. And it does give you a little thicker skin after it's all over. But it goes back to then the second piece of it, which is storytelling. It's the why. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about the company as much as it was about, in my opinion, this business is, what does this change do for the end user, which is the brokers and the agents? Does it help a broker attract another agent to their company? And does it help an agent get the attention of a consumer? And the reality is there were a lot of consumers that were saying they didn't want a gold post and a tri-level home on a brown sign in front of their home. And it doesn't mean that everything's luxury and has to have that feel. There are a lot of brands that serve different segments of the market. But
sure,
you also, you can't have it say, this feels like my grandfather's brand. I mean, that just isn't setting you up for success. And so what we saw that the outcome is it really reinvigorated and brought a lot of younger people to that brand that ordinarily I don't think would have, because they pictured it as something that they saw on the school bus when they were in kindergarten.
Yeah. And that's a fair response. I mean, different generations will respond differently to things. And at that particular time, gold and black wasn't popular colors, and you softened all of it. I thought the brand rebranding was done really well for what it's worth. And
thank you.
Having been involved in setting up a brand, it's a difficult process. You're right. Not everyone's going to like it, but you also, I think I would add just a comment on it that sometimes stuff changes and people need to move on too. Like there's an element of they may not like it, and there's another avenue for them to be part of. And that's not meant to be that they're awful people. It just meant to be that this doesn't fit the direction of where, you're aligned on that process. But I love how you guys softened it and took a brand that was known for gold coats and made it more modern. And I think it was quite an achievement. And I forgot it was 120 some thousand people. Oh my gosh, got an ulcer hearing that number.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
That's got to be an interesting thing, even internationally, how you get everybody across not just the United States, but language barriers going through that. That's a whole other conversation in itself.
And some of those countries, it will take much longer for some of those changes to happen. I'll tell you, when I went to China with that company, here's what will amaze you. The average age of the agent, at the time, there were 23 or 24,000 agents affiliated with that brand in China. The average age was 23 years old, because fresh out of college, it's like a base and bonus. It's a great career. It's not commissioned in that country. And so it was really interesting to see such young people. And by the way, that all wear the gold jacket because it meant something in their country. The clothing and the jackets kind of outlived the industry here in the US. But in other countries, it still symbolizes something. And it was fascinating. So I found myself on stage in China in a gold jacket and on this mug and this coloring. It's not good, guys. It's not good.
Come on,
my wife says that about orange, by the way.
I have a question though about the gold jacket. Was there any consideration about bringing it back in the U.S.?
They had tried that before
the conference.
Before I had taken the reign there, they had tried to do that a few years before. One of my predecessors decided that they'd try to bring it back, and my understanding is it didn't go well.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
Keith, did you have a question, or was that the question you were going to
ask?
That was
it.
Make sure
I could see, like, it's such a tempting thing to want to attach back to, right? And like, I get why it might be working in some other places, but I also get why it probably wouldn't work here. So
yeah, I mean, style originates here. A lot of it originates here. Let's move to. So you went from there to coming back to basically running Remax, and were president and CEO there until just recently. So first of all, what was that transition like, going from, were they publicly traded at the time you came back? They were already, correct?
Yeah,
Remax was publicly traded?
They were.
Okay. So you had been there originally when they weren't. So it was when Dave was still running the show. And then you left. Then you went for, and I think Anywhere would be Realogy at that time still.
It was.
They were still Realogy when you were at C21. Publicly traded or private at that time?
Public. So market leader, Truly, and Zillow.
Public.
So I was 5 public companies back to back.
Okay. So I guess my comments, a couple things, my question is a couple things. You were at Remax prior to it being public, and then you came back to run it after being public. What was that like? And then sort of along those lines during your tenure there, what were some of the challenges that you experienced, not just within the organization, just you were there when the lawsuits were happening, lots of change, public scrutiny about everything and stock price. Like, give us all the dirty stuff you can share.
Well, and obviously not being there, I certainly want to be respectful of my time that I was there, my storytelling. But I'll tell you this, that there was, people said, hey, why would you go back? And I said, what was interesting is, even though they had gone public, they were founded on a very entrepreneurial spirit. And I think that was still part of the culture. I've always said that when companies go public, there are 2 departments that eventually take over running the company. It's either legal or finance, instead of having the front side of the business really run the company. And coming back to Remax, I didn't feel like it was similar to some of the other public companies that I'd been in. Some very dramatic bureaucracy and hard to move stuff. And then there were other public companies that I had experience with that it didn't even feel public. It was just, let's go, and we hope Wall Street keeps up with us. And so I think that the best part, and I'm not just going to talk about Remax. I think talking about Remax and Realogy and then Zillow Group that included Truly and Market Leader, all those experiences were very different in a public environment, where some were much heavier on paperwork and bureaucracy and committees, and then others were, let's roll up our sleeves and go. And so I think that in any company, you find where that sits and then how you navigate that. And I think because of some of the history, I found that when I was at Remax before compared to coming back, it was a different organization in many ways, and that's not a bad thing. It was just change and evolution. So I think some of the challenges You had people that were new, that only knew it as a public company and never had the history, and they didn't know any different.
Yeah.
And then I worked with people that had 20, 25, 30 years under their belts with the organization that were
Sure.
It used to not be like this. And so you had this really interesting thing internally from employee to employee, some that didn't know any different and some that were 30-year vets. And they all had very different opinions on where the culture was, what was good, what was bad. And so that was interesting to navigate both of those scenarios. Some of those people I had great relationships from years ago. Other people were brand new to me that I didn't know. And so I think that that's a pretty unique way to go into a company, is having been there in the past when they were private, coming back and leading them after they went public, and then having employees, friends, colleagues that were a mixture of all of the above. But I just went for it in my style. And similar to C21, I outlined, we talked about the rebranding. There were 2 or 3 other initiatives with Century 21 that I said were important to me. And I kind of did the same thing at Remax. And one of them was a challenge. They had bought a lot of their own tech, wanted to build it all in-house, and spent tens upon tens of millions of dollars. And I'm not giving any secrets. That's all in the public filings. And I didn't think it was working. I didn't think it was working for our brokers and our agents. And so when I officially took over as president, when I officially took over as CEO, it was 97 days from start to finish that we made a decision to not build our own tech, and not only put the whole deal together, but stand and put out a press release and stand on stage and announce that we were going to partner. So I think that there are buy, build, partner opportunities in the industry. And I think because of some of the portals that started acquiring tech, and that started with truly acquiring Market Leader for $344 million years ago, that started this trend of everybody thought in order to remain competitive, especially big companies, well, they had to own their own CRM and build their own tech so they could have proprietary tools to say, well, our CRM, James, texts and yours doesn't, so we're a better company. And I watched that for years and thought it was nonsense. And so the thing that I think is interesting now is I think there are certain things that you can build as an organization, but the only thing that moves faster than changes of the market in this industry is tech. And if you're not a tech company, it's hard. And that was a bold move, but one that I'm very proud of. That's probably my most proud accomplishment in the last 4.5 years at Remax, because I watched other companies that didn't have the guts to stand on stage and say, we made a mistake, this didn't work. And be able to eat crow like that in front of your network and say, hey, we tried it, rug, broom, under, moving on. And it was not because of I was anything extraordinary in this. It was because of my experience before in other companies that watched things that didn't work, and I watched leaders not take accountability for it and not willing to bury their ego or their pride and say, let's try something else because this wasn't ideal. And I remember saying years before I came back to Remax when I witnessed this, and I'm not going to give examples because some of these people are still in the industry. I kept thinking in the back of my head, man, if I was the one, I would never do it like that. And all of a sudden I found myself in the position that I was the one. And I went, okay, you better follow exactly what you said, which you would never do that. Crow, eat, pride, gone, and let's move forward.
Well, there's a lot of ego in our business, obviously. It's interesting when I listen to other executives talk about it. So I came from tech as well prior to this, as being in residential real estate, but I've done a couple tech companies. And what I think people forget is you can spend a bunch of money on innovation, but once you build something, you not only have to support that product going forward, but you got to spend more money on innovation to continue to innovate. And it's when I hear executives, which will be unnamed, talk about how they finished all of their tech, I'm like, what do you mean exactly? I don't understand what you mean. Because
never done.
It's never done. You have to continue to invest not only to keep the product you built and fix it and upgrade it, but then you've got to keep enhancing. It's almost like a never ending game. So good on you for doing that, by the way. And I can only imagine on a stage that big, admitting not a mistake, but this isn't the direction we're going to continue. We're going to go in a different direction as a company, and taking that big step is probably earned you a lot of credibility, actually, for being honest, which most people are incapable of doing anymore, and just eating crow, because it's refreshing that someone like, oh my God, someone admitted we didn't do this right. Wow, that's new. Everyone points the finger somewhere else in this day and age.
I'll ask this of both of you. What do you guys think? Why don't more leaders just take the bullets and move forward? why that sort of that is ego is the default answer, but what's underneath that? Like, why don't more leaders just have a comfort with saying what their observation of reality is and moving forward in and around that reality?
I will defer to Nick.
Yeah, Keith, I think this just Nick's opinion here, but I think it's leaders think that it's going to make them look weak, or wait, I was wrong.
Right.
And I don't know about you. Maybe this could be my 25th year of marriage. We've been together 33, 34 years. If I didn't admit I was wrong once in a while, this probably wouldn't have worked out this way.
And so, I mean, like when I see Amazon reviews and it's all 5 stars, I trust it less, right? Like I need to see a couple 3 stars in there to know, because no one bats 1,000, right? Like I feel like as a leader, if you can come out and sort of own your screw ups and communicate it and explain it and talk about it, and so long as you are right more than you're wrong, you get the grace.
And that's the key. If you're a screw up every quarter, we got a problem. But let's get the average here. But no, I think leaders shy away from it because they think people are going to look at them and say, well, you're really not that great of a leader. When I actually think it's the opposite. I find it interesting that I always found employees when we do like an all hands meeting and you'd say, here's the state of the real estate industry. And especially, James, you mentioned at the top of the hour. I mean, we've dealt with the lawsuits for 4 years and I was front and center on that for our company, as were several others. And when you would just tell the employees, here's what's happening in the market. Here's what's happening with sales. Here's what's happening with our company. Here's what's happening with our revenue, our expenses. And when we're just really upfront versus I think leaders think that their people aren't that bright. They treat them like elementary. Well, if we just keep this in the leadership huddle, no one will really ever know. And I think your employees, that's one thing as a leader that I found, your employees are just a hell of a lot smarter than any leader thinks that they are. And the minute your lips start the BS on stage, I believe everyone can see right through it. And so I think you do gain a lot more credibility if you can say as much as you can. And sure, there's things that are confidential, but I also see that in leadership.
Sign an NDA.
Some people are so worried about confidentiality, then you don't tell anybody anything. Well, then they don't trust you as a leader. And so you got to find that right balance of being authentic, transparent, and creating trust. And man, I have found when your people trust you and then you make a big change like that, they'll follow you through anything. They'll walk the hot coals through fire with you.
Yeah, Keith, I can't add anything to that. Everything Nick said is what I would honestly say too. I mean, obviously we work together, we know that, but I actually have a leadership question that I want to ask that you just made me think of. So you've got Realogy, which is run by Ryan Schneider, who's from Capital One. The new CEO of Remax, not in your position, but is it Holdings? Holdings is the parent, right? Do I have it correctly? Remax Holdings. I forget his niece from Dish, correct? From Dish Network. And then you even look at NAR with Nakia is from the newspaper business. So there's a constant debate going on. It's why I'm asking this question, what your thoughts on it, on whether this trend of hiring people from outside the industry, or this experiment, I'm going to call it to some degree, of hiring people outside the industry is working, paying off, or is it actually an inhibitor? I've gotten comments all over the map on this for like new ideas and innovation. And then people are like, this person doesn't understand anything about our business. And like, it's just a massive learning curve. So like, what's your take on that?
Wow, that's a good one, because 2 out of the 3 that you mentioned, I was very close to when they came into their organizations. So maybe a little close to home. But here's what I would say.
Then take Zillow. Zillow is not from the industry either. Neither is Rich. I mean, you could pick it any way you wanted to. I just generalized thoughts on it.
Yeah. So. I think one, good ideas can come from anywhere, and there's translational business experience that works. And when you look at companies that are about revenue, EBITDA, expense control, like all those basics of business translate from anywhere that you come. I think what becomes interesting, though, is I believe that real estate's really all about marketing. I believe that it's just much more about marketing than we talk about. We sit at these industry conferences and we talk about all these different dynamics, but I don't think we talk about marketing enough, like truly nitty gritty. So I've seen people that have come from outside the industry that have pretty significant marketing backgrounds, but then there's a translation that has to happen. Most of them come from B2C businesses, and so they're going direct to consumer. And I never forget, I worked with some of those people, and especially there was someone I worked with. It wasn't Ryan, even though he came from Capital One. It was somebody else I worked with that came from American Express, and they were always talking about, how do we become top of wallet, because that's what credit card companies talk about all the time. When you pull out your wallet or your purse, what's the card that's top of wallet? You want a consumer to make sure that that card is top of wallet. Well, that never translated to the fact that we're kind of a B2B to B2C business. And because many, at least on the franchise side, we're not directly to the consumer. There's an agent in the middle that's an entrepreneur. And so our business is not hard. I've never thought that it is, but I think it's nuanced. And I think that people dismiss the amount of relationships. When we say relationships, they're like, oh, I was told at one meeting I was coming into on leadership, don't mention that this is a relationship business. The leaders are tired of hearing you say that, and it doesn't mean much. And that's when I knew right then I was surrounded by a group of leaders that could not translate their experience into this industry because they wanted to dismiss the relationships because they didn't have any, nor did they have the skills to get them. And so I think
it also is such a hard problem to solve for, right? Like, it's much easier to just say, I don't want to talk about the strength of the relationship between the real estate professional and their client, because that's a really tough one to solve for. Let's talk about funnels. Let's talk about, dumb comments like top of wallet and wallet share. And, like, those are much more measurable and easier problems to solve than how do you measure the relationship between anyone and their client, right?
I don't know. I think the relationship.
I said that. The views being expressed are the views of Keith Robinson, not Nick May.
I don't know. I think the relationship's pretty easy, but I think what I found with most of the people that come from outside the industry, they don't overnight turn the business in a miraculous different direction. I see them having to be students for a year or two before they can really meaningfully contribute to get brokers and agents to move in the direction that they want.
Because nothing in this industry is normal.
Yeah.
It defies logic, don't you think?
Yeah, to some degree.
I think it's true. I think all industries have a relative. I think leadership is transferable, and each industry has nuance, right?
Agree.
And I think the best leaders sort of know what they're great at, and also know what they don't know. And so if you're coming in from outside, you better be surrounding yourself with people who really intuitively understand the residential real estate space. And if you're coming at it from inside, then you better go pull people that are from outside the residential real estate space. So you're covering your weaknesses or the blind spots you might have.
Agree with that. I agree with that, Keith.
Nick, let me, just for time's sake, I know we've got two questions. I want to ask one around lawsuits because it wouldn't be a podcast without one. I know Keith has one around AI and sort of the future of the next 36 months. I'll let him ask that one after. But obviously NAR settled. We've been pretty vocal that we thought it would happen that way. What's your thoughts on them settling? And then candidly, what are your thoughts on the settlement itself? Was it a win for NAR? Was it a win for the industry? Like, I know you've been out talking about it. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, I haven't. I was close to it. We, in my most recent role, we were the second company to settle behind Anywhere. Yeah. Here's what I will say. To the industry, it is not as big of a deal as some people are making it out to be. That's just my opinion. I think after we get rolling with things, people are going to look back. Let's do this a year from now, mark the calendar, and we'll figure out everyone that thought their hair was on fire and people that have already turned their license in and, oh my gosh, the sky's falling. And the podcast a year from now is going to be, gosh, we didn't realize that we just had to adjust a couple of conversations and a couple of disclosures, and it's really not going to be that different. That's my opinion. And so we can see none of us have the magic crystal ball. But here's the reality. I think where NAR ended up, I think it was good that they settled. And I know the number sounds big, over 400 million, but when you look at 1.5 million people and it's spread over 4 years, if you just drop that into a monthly amount per member, it's $5 a month. Yeah. It's $5 a month. It's a reasonable settlement for a trade group that's that large. The fact that they release liability from the vast majority of the members, there's obviously still some companies that there's mechanisms in place for them to continue to fill the pot for the settlement fund, and that'll happen. I think the formula that they set forth was unreasonable for most people. And people have to remember that these settlements are all based on their ability to pay. The plaintiffs do not want to bankrupt any company because then they don't get any additional dollars into the settlement fund.
Can you say that again, please?
For the people in the back.
For the people in the back. Can you say that again?
The plaintiffs are not interested in companies taking them into bankruptcy over this. Their settlements are based on their ability to pay. And so when you really look, especially at the public companies that disclose how much cash they have on hand and what their settlements were or are, it's about 50 to 60% of their cash that's sitting in an account. And so, the idea that they put a mechanism in place for these other companies to settle is only just a cattle prod to get them to the table to get the realistic number of what they can afford to pay. And so I think it's going to add, well, it already added with Compass recently with 57 million. But my guess a week ago when I did one of these just purely on the settlement was I guessed it would add 125 to 150 million in the settlement fund. And so we're 57 million. So I've got about 90 to go between those other companies to see if we get close. And I just like to forecast and see if you
So you're under $1 billion. You're under $1 billion for the whole thing.
I am. I'm around 3/4.
Yeah. 3/4. Yeah. And after the lawyers take out their fees, then there's really nothing left for the consumer anyway.
No, and we'll start postcards and see did you buy a house from 2016 to 2020? Here's your card, maybe $13.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Anyway, I think once the dust settles,
$3.77.
It's not going to be that big of a deal.
Okay. Keith,
I got one.
I got two.
I've got the question on technology, just because you are someone who has been in and around real estate and technology in that intersection for a long time. So AI is the hot new buzzword in every pitch deck I look at nowadays. I see AI in there somewhere, and I like to ask him, how long ago did you add that slide? But where do you really see artificial intelligence and this sort of what seemingly the next internet wave, the next big thing? How's that going to fit into residential real estate in the future, in your opinion?
Here's what I found about tech in my nearly 3 decades, that you have to decide if it's a toy or if it's tech. It's like the first time I got an iPad for Christmas, and it was just a giant phone, and it didn't even do much. I still had to carry my laptop. It was a toy. It was not tech. And I think that we have a lot of, I got in trouble for saying this a few weeks ago. I think we have a lot of adult toys in this industry. That's not what I mean. A lot of adult tech toys in this industry. And so we get distracted by it.
Now, Keith.
But here's the deal. To me, if tech does one of two things, it makes an agent more efficient, or it makes the consumer experience, which is still ridden by anxiety, smoother. To me, then it's here to stay. Yeah. So is AI going to have a place? Absolutely. But is 90% of it just going to be a toy and a distraction in our industry? I think so too. I think we have to find the 10% that sticks. The one that I think is the most fun so far, I've demoed it a couple times on stage, is visual AI. I know when I was full-time selling real estate, people could not walk into a home and picture themselves living there because the walls were the wrong color, the furniture didn't fit right.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love some of these visual ones. I believe that in a short period of time, you ask like 36 months, what'll happen? I think most sites that have listings on them will have a quote virtual remodel button to where you can make the living room look different and you can change the colors. I mean, we're doing it now when you can go on Amazon and buy a product and say, what does it look like in your living room? And you can use that visual AI. Real estate's all emotional, and it's a very visual thing. And so I believe the visual element of AI is going to have the largest consumer impact and make agents more efficient than any other component of AI.
That's good feedback.
It's funny, Keith, I'll add that I also think assistants, like a personal assistant that's like on your phone doing stuff. Just that's the other part. That's the other 10% I would add. I totally agree with Nick on the visual stuff. And he and I had an opportunity to see some things that Homes.com was doing when we were together a few weeks ago in the new Apple Vision Pro thing. But I think the ability to have an assistant that's automatically calling your client that you're driving to let them know that you're 15 minutes out because traffic's bad, and it's doing it automatically. I think that kind of tech is going to be really interesting. Everybody will have a personal assistant through AI as well, which is some really cool stuff out there.
Totally
we did a pod, Nick, you'd love to see with Howard Tager, with Ylopo.
It was crazy.
Where they're creating voice AI that's a call center, and it responds to real estate inquiries and talks to the client and moves them down the funnel. And it is freaky deaky, like how good it is. Like it's better than a call center with, almost as better than a call center with an actual human being on it. And I'm like,
no, it is better because there is no rejection. Like AI doesn't feel rejection, right? So it just will ask the questions. It was crazy.
Yeah, it's free. I'll have to send it to you. It's a pretty.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
All right,
last one. We always end on this. If you were an agent or a brokerage, what's the one thing you'd implement today in your business to set you up properly for 2024?
Go get a buyer or seller.
Yeah, novel. That's a great answer.
No,
which we haven't had yet.
Seriously, I was asked that just a couple of days ago, and I said, "There's no fancy answer. The reality is here's what I know in nearly 30 years in this industry: people buy and sell houses every single year, regardless of interest rates, regardless of the tech, regardless of lawsuits. I mean, I went through dual agency, sub agency. IDX was, oh my gosh, the sky's falling for all the heavy listing agents. Like, we've seen different changes before, and the reality is, if you're a professional, if you know the business, you know the mortgage business, there are people that are going to need professional advisors that need to buy and sell. And I'll tell you what, the reason I'm not worried about the lawsuits, because I know this. Both buyers and sellers are willing to pay trusted advisors to help them with these large transactions if you're good. And that will not change. Mm-hmm. How you give them a disclosure and what you practice your script to be, fine. Get used to that. Get yourself educated. But if I'm an agent out there, my advice is there's someone near you that likes, knows, and trusts you, that's this close to you, that probably wants to buy and sell if you're engaging with them.
Great answer.
Well, that is literally what Crazy Uncle Keith says on almost every time somebody asks him the same question. He's like, take that negative energy you have, and every time you feel it, just focus it on calling a past client. Yeah. That's the trigger to be like, I'm getting anxiety, call a past client. This lawsuit, call a past client.
That makes you afraid, text past client. Yeah. Like, go sell a house. You'll feel better. If you sell a house, I promise you'll feel better.
Nick, my friend, thank you so much for being on the pod today. It was a pleasure to have you. You are a gem to the industry. I mean that genuinely as well, because I just love how direct you are. Your candor is great, and we can't wait to see where you land. Whoever gets you next is going to be they're going to be a very successful organization.
Should we announce it right now?
I look forward to seeing that.
Yeah,
you can if you want. Do it here.
Yeah, hit it.
Do it. Hit it.
No,
seriously, do it right here. We'll make the announcement here. No. He's like, okay.
He's up now.
We'll look forward to that announcement, and
it would be.
You are welcome to. You are welcome to do it here. So, and my friend, I'm sure I'll see you at an industry function soon. So,
hey, great, honored to be with you guys. Yeah. You've put together something pretty neat. So, thanks for making me part of it.
Of course, appreciate it. It's our job to say out loud what everybody's only thinking to themselves. It's your job to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode.